talking with Mark Andrew, who is, I don't know, would you agree you're the leading candidate for mayor in Minneapolis? And if so, that was an easy agreement. Why do you say or think you are?
We're getting great feedback. We have more endorsements than any other candidate. We've got, really important legislators, Senator Jeff Hayden, Senator Kerry Dietzick, several, we have more.
That's 2 votes.
Oh, but they carry large constituencies with them. And we have 5 Minneapolis school board members, 4 Minneapolis park board members. We have more endorsements from Minneapolis city council members than the city council members who are running for mayor.
Who is this we we're talking about?
Our campaign effort.
Okay, Mark Andrew. Well, why, this would, your opponents would say this kind of almost, not completely universal, but widespread endorsement among what would be the DFL establishment in many views, that kind of points out your weaknesses too. That, I mean, is this a fair assessment of Mark Andrew, that you represent the old school in the city in terms of the DFL party and its allies, and that maybe that's behind the times? That you've been getting a lot of arrows in the back during this campaign.
We have sustained a few body blows during the course of the campaign, but that particular criticism I welcome discussion of, because it is so far off the mark. Our campaign is, it's true, we do get support from some of the established Democrats, because I had a great record in public office and I've been around the block a few times. But the guts of our campaign is young people. If you look around the office here, and if you look around the campaign, where our energy is young people. We're endorsed by the College Dems. We're formally endorsed by the My DFL. We're formally endorsed by the LGBT community, the Stonewall DFL caucus. And so we have a really diverse support base in our campaign. It's actually our strength.
Yeah, I'm not denying that you have a diversity of support from young to old, but just talk to me a little bit about whether there are any, issues in a city that has been under such one-party control for so long. If you were a young person in this town with political ambitions, you'd probably, 9 out of 10 chances, ally yourself with someone like Mark Andrew, because it seems like that's where the smart money would go. But is there a downside to having a political establishment that's in lockstep, a one-party rule in the city that's really been this way for 40 years? How many years were you in office?
16 years.
Has any of your opponents been in office longer?
Oh, in heavens no. We have more elected experience by far than any candidate running for mayor, but we've also got more private sector experience than most of the leading candidates running for mayor. So I would say the old guard attacks would have some validity, but for 2 reasons, but for 2 exceptions. One is what I said about the depth and breadth of the support we have all across different constituencies in the city. But the second thing is more important, and that is my history is as a innovator, and we come to this campaign with new ideas, with new energy. I've been out of public life 14 years. I would make the argument that some of the other candidates running for mayor are the old guard, because they're hopelessly trapped in City Hall and have not been able to get out of City Hall. They've been there for a year, or for a decade, they've run things for a decade, and that's fine. I mean,
yeah, but let's go back to your entrepreneurial or innovative record that began after your years in office.
Absolutely not.
Well, when
I
did it
was,
start? Tell me the history.
Well, I mean, I think probably my strongest quote brand asset, if we were,
Right.
if let's say we're looking at the
Sure.
campaigns as products, our brand asset is innovation and creativity. We did the Midtown Greenway. We created. We were major players in social service reforms. We were pioneers on light rail transit when nobody wanted to do light rail transit. So I just carry that. We carry
During
that.
your
We
public
play it
service,
forward.
but I guess what I thought you were claiming was sort of a private business market record that is separate from your record in office. You're talking about innovations
Yeah,
during your terms in office.
and in my business life.
In your business life, but
Yeah.
then when did your business life begin?
My business life began, well, not counting my state fair business, which began in college.
What's the name of the French fry?
Thank you very much. I love you for this. World's greatest French fries. The red one, not the yellow one.
Yeah, I think there was was there a new one or a new facade at the fair this year?
No, but there will be next year. We're rebranding next year.
All right, you are. I'm surprised this hasn't come up so far, but you do by far sell the most French fries of any candidate for mayor of Minneapolis.
Yes, we do.
And then you started that in college.
I started the s'mores stand
Oh, some more.
in college,
Okay.
and then the French fries came a few years later. And
I knew you in college, but I don't think I ever tried your French fries until long after.
well, because when you and I met, you trained me in. I hope I can say this on the air.
Yes.
And I will say,
As an editorial writer, I
became
didn't
a-
actually succeed. I attempted to train you as an editorial writer.
I got criticized for one of my first editorials
By whom?
by one of the professors at the J School.
Welcome
And-
to my world.
Yeah, because the editorial was supporting the attempted marriage of Jack Baker and Mike McConnell.
Right. Yeah.
The first gay marriage in the state, and I wrote an editorial in the Minnesota Daily after you trained me in. And for our viewers, I know probably going to sound like I'm totally sucking up to the press, but you were a great editor, and you had a reputation as a great editor and a great writer, and so when
I shucked those reputations later.
yeah, well, it took you years to get rid of them, and you taught me how to do that. I wrote about 50 editorials for the paper, and I got to be pretty good at it. But the first one I wrote, I got criticized for because I tried to be a constitutional scholar when I knew nothing about that sort of thing.
Well, it's now written into law. Enshrined in law, Jack Baker and Mike McConnell, they've been married 42 years. They're probably,
Wow.
without doubt, the oldest or longest living married gay couple in America.
It's incredible.
It is still an amazing story. But my point about your business versus your public life, could you have done those 14 years of business service, innovation, creation, creativity, however you phrase that, without having had your public career? And is this part of the establishment edifice in
Yeah.
Minneapolis? If you want everybody's a DFLer in Minneapolis, practically, other than Dan Cohen and Cam Winton, and their second choices are Democrats for mayor. But almost everybody's a Democrat because if you want to succeed in this town, you have to be a Democrat.
Yeah, it's a DFL town. I think Mitt Romney got 13% of the vote here.
And those
So-
people are being hunted down, aren't they?
Yeah.
Forced out.
Well, but the Republican side of the equation is not a monolithic structure. You've got pro-business Republicans who are supporting our campaign, because I'm kind of I'm a hybrid politician, always have been. I'm very progressive socially, very progressive, but I've always been fiscally prudent, and I think I carry that in. And I think there are probably some of my detractors probably look at that as being too pro-business. I've heard that a few times during the course of the campaign.
Is there any, because you've been in office a long time, you've been a part of politics and the whole, really the environment in Minneapolis. Is there any validity to criticism from people outside the city that there's a downside or a lack, we're missing anything to have such one party lock for so long?
It's a
in
danger.
the largest city. What is the danger?
It's a danger because it's like inbreeding. It's good to have different perspectives, but the party, I say this as a former chair of the Minnesota DFL party, the party is in a dynamic organization, ought to be in a continuous state of reinvention. And we reinvent our politics here to be more inclusive, not more exclusive. We try to do that. And, in my administration, everybody has a seat at the table. And that includes business people. It includes social progressives. It includes fiscal moderates. It includes people of color. It includes women. And
I've been reading that you have some pretty strong support in the Somali community.
We've been very
in
fortunate.
Minneapolis.
We've been very fortunate. They like us because we embrace the Somali community. It's a very important.
The city or Mark Andrew? Is there a Tammany Hall aspect here? Here's the new immigrants, the refugees. They see who's in charge. They see where the train is going. They get on the train. Is that? Is there an aspect to that if you're...
maybe. I mean, hopefully, they're sophisticated, politically speaking, so they're going to go with their self-interest in mind, and, they know that I will invite that community to become a part of the fabric of the city.
Have you made any promises of appointments or positions that you would...
I don't do that.
Well, what will you do, Mark? If you are the mayor, what is it? Is it the first Monday in January? You come into office, you take the oath by the Father of Waters or wherever, and you go back to the office. What's the first thing you do?
Well, I've made a promise, a public promise, that the first thing I do is I appoint a mayor's council on education. And so...
you made that promise like a week ago.
Yeah, or a few weeks ago.
And under pressure, under fire from all the other candidates who seem to be taking shots at you on your education policy. And by your way, your good friend, Mayor Ryback, excoriated you on the education policies of your campaign. How did you feel about that?
Well, I said in the media, he actually made a good point.
Which was stupid, or?
Well, he excoriated me because I took a unnecessary shot at the Koch brothers. And
he cares about the feelings of the Koch brothers?
Well, you'd have to ask the mayor about that. But it was in a broader framework, and it was actually, it was something I probably should not have said.
Well, let's talk about the core of the education policy, because after many years of mayors saying we don't have any responsibility for education, although I would point out both Sharon Sales Belton and Don Fraser were very public and strong supporters. They weren't critics, they were strong supporters of the public school system in Minneapolis, the largest in the state, or second largest now. So, something about those criticisms of public education now and of your support for teachers has seemed also to be in an unnatural kind of lockstep. What is your analysis of what's going on that front?
It's really interesting, and the issue has emerged because of its importance to the long-term health of the city. And so all the candidates have jumped on the train regarding education, and rightly so, even though you correctly point out mayor's actually got very little statutory power to address it. I would say, Nick, the most important thing to do as a mayor on the issue of education is to be less of an ideologue and more of a leader. The schools, the educational establishment needs a leader. to speak out in a non-ideological way, to pull the parties together and to get them at a table to hammer out areas of common interest. And there is a lot of commonality between the warring groups in public education today. A great deal of commonality, more than people acknowledge.
There's a lot of competition over the public dollar that is spent on education too. An education system is under attack by forces that would like to carve up some of that money for their own, to fund their own theories. Does that seem accurate to you? We have one of the candidates for mayor, one of your opponents, Mr. Samuels, once famously said, burn down North High School. And then at the debate the other night, I heard candidates say, maybe you, it was an outrage, 2,000 students from North Minneapolis go to school in the suburbs. That was sort of ignoring, though, that there's been damage inflicted from politicians inside the city on the school system. So how do you address that? What is it the first thing that you do? What is it you want from that education committee or council?
Let's first turn down the volume of the rhetoric. And we hear very negative statements made from the fringes on both sides of the education debate. We can't have that. The first thing the mayor does is what a leader does. The mayor has to be a leader. The mayor shouldn't be the expert on education. We don't have a statutory place for that. The mayor does have a place for being a leader and putting people together and then helping to move the ball forward so we can come to an agreement on one thing, just one thing, and that is improving the school performance of our students. That's the only agenda item that ought to be under discussion.
I think I read somewhere, are you the only candidate who sent a child to the Minneapolis public school system?
I think I'm considered the only major candidate.
That's what I would mean of the top 7 or 8 candidates?
Yeah, well, Bob Fine, if he's one of the top.
Right.
So I'm not sure he's been treated that way.
But the major
Major
opponents don't have that. You said 2
Yeah.
children?
Yep, 2 kids.
And they didn't go to Breck
No.
or Blake or whatever?
No.
Okay, well, and you're also one of the few candidates who grew up in Minneapolis in that leading cohort. Well, we have a limited time, so what other issues do you think are at the top of your list in terms of importance, and briefly, what would you do about them?
I'd say there are several issues. First of all, here's what I think of modern. I talk about the mayor's office in the framework of a modern mayor, and I would say RT has been a modern mayor. There's a handful.
Very, model of the model.
Yeah.
Modern major general.
Yeah. And there are several around the country that have led the way. So I think he's been a bit of a trailblazer in a lot of respects. In that regard, as a regionalist and from his perspective and the way he leads, his style of leadership, very positive for the city. I think a mayor's got to do 3 things. Number one, you got to have a big, bold vision. And I've never been bashful about getting a big proposal or a big vision out on the table. Second thing is you need to be able to pull people together. And the third thing the mayor needs to be able to do is be willing to actually execute, get the proposal out there, advocate for it, lead on it, and I'm going to lead on 3 things. Greenest city in America. I think it's a very important strategic issue for the city, and it's an important quality of life issue. The second is the schools and the achievement gap, and the third is responsible economic development that drives expansion of the tax base and job growth in our city. And we need to attract more people into the city. I want 100,000 more people living here in 20 years than we have today, because it will add to the quality of life, it'll drive the per capita cost of infrastructure down, and it'll spread the responsibility for financing the cost of the city across a bigger number of people.
If you should get elected and you were lucky enough to get re-elected and you were here for the 2020 census, Minneapolis might actually be a city where people of color are the majority.
Yeah.
What are the challenges in being a mayor to a city that is so rapidly changing in demographics when you look like Mark Andrew?
I think the most important thing we can do is embrace our citizens and embrace their potential for contributing positively to the community. And it doesn't matter what color you are, what size you are, or what language you speak. To me, it's in the attitude of the city to its people. Everybody has a place at the table. We expect them to be productive people, and we expect everybody to contribute. And if they do, everybody will benefit.
And has this message got to the police department?
It's gotten to many in the police department, and we still have festering problems in the police department. And the mayor, as I know you know, has a great deal to say about the police department, who runs it. I mean, it's really the major. It's a city agency that the mayor has more control over than any other, with appointing powers and city charter responsibility.
Would you keep the chief?
We will talk, but I am impressed by the chief. This much I know. We don't know each other very well yet. So I'm hedging a little bit because I want to spend a little more time with her. But here's what I see. I see humanity. I see accountability. I see intelligence. And I think she is operating admirably in a very tough situation.
Well, we're
So far.
yes, okay, we're about out of time. I would be upheld for criticism of don't ask you about ranked choice voting. And I asked the other night whether the candidates would continue to support it if elected. You said yes, and yet many of your supporters are very prominent critics, and I think would like to reverse the ranked choice voting system that Minneapolis now has.
Who's been critical?
Well, we
of my
don't.
supporters?
I could give you a list. You don't want to know.
Okay.
But my question is, what will you do to improve? How is it? Forget that. Tell me how it's changed the election and your approach to it.
It's counterintuitive for a politician to try to be second choice of somebody. So I think that has necessitated a different way of thinking. The positives of ranked choice voting clearly are involve civility and involve the prospect of greater participation, but it's clearly an imperfect system. I don't see very much value having 35 or 50 people on the ballot, given the amount of money available to get messages out and the amount of time available. So I like ranked choice voting as a concept. If we win the election, we'll probably want to tweak it a little bit to make it operate more efficiently.
Would you raise the bar for entrance into a citywide race? Instead of $20, maybe 1,000 registered voters putting their signatures on paper?
Yeah, I would. I'd do it the way you're suggesting. I don't think it's fair to raise the price of the registration fee, but I do think that a serious candidate ought to be able to get 1,000 or signatures, and that would winnow the field substantially.
Anything else? Give us your last best shot, mayoral hopeful, Mark Andrew.
I've never been more excited for a job in my life. I've spent, several decades in public service or supporting our community, and I just have a great sense of optimism and hope for the future of the city, and I think I'm a person who can move the ball forward and make our city a better place.
Thank you very much. This was a brief interview. If elected, will you agree to give us the other half?
Yeah.
Sit down with us again. Don't lose our phone number, like the present mayor sometimes does.
I do want to say one thing about so-called alternative media and different forms of journalism. I'm a guy who had enormous respect for the institution of journalism and hate to see happening to great Minnesota dailies what's been happening around the country. So I'm a big believer in good, solid, independent, responsible journalism, and I want to make sure that these different outlets have a chance to flourish and grow in the city. So I'll be available to talk again.
Okay, thank you very much. Good luck, Mark Andrews.
Thank you.